over our wireframes and our API routes and our database tables, we can finally get to the submission for the week, which is our Trello board, okay? But if you've thought through all of the front end and all of the back end and how everything works and connects, then when you start doing this Trello board, you can just speed through it, okay? So I have my to-do list main Trello board, which has several boards attached to it, okay? I have 6 boards attached to it. I have project setup, which is going to be assignment 2, okay? So for assignment 2, I have create the local project with a React front end and an SJS back end. Then I'm going to have my front end setup, my back end setup, and my GitHub setup. Okay, and then there's corresponding tasks with all of them, right? So I need to set up a basic router with React Router. I need to set up Chakra UI. I need to create a test button that's going to ping the test route on the back end, which we'll see in the next story. And then we also need to set up application-wide toast notifications. So we're going to use those once we get into the coding. On the back end, we have a few more items. We need to add Postgres. We need to create a test entity, which is basically a table. It's the schema for a table. We need to create database migration commands, okay? If you create nice, clean database migration commands in your package JSON, then you can just run them as you need to while you're working on the project. So it's a lot of work in the beginning, or maybe some confusing steps in the beginning, but then you're set for the rest of the build. Okay, I also need to set up access to the test table, that entity in my Nest.js service. I need to create an env file with all of my database setup variables, and maybe I'll include some other variables such as my port that I'm going to run my application on. I'm going to create an env copy, so that way when other people go to review my application, they can pull down the GitHub repository and use the env copy to make their own env. Because remember, in our next task, we are going to add the env file to the list of files that the git ignore should ignore, okay? And then finally, we will set up that test route and verify that everything works as intended. All right, the final thing that we're gonna do next week in our project setup is create the GitHub repository, okay? So we'll create our repo and push our local code to it. We'll add a README, and then we will make sure that we add setup instructions for both the front end and the back end to the README, okay? I like to include the project setup as a feature because there's a lot of work that goes into the initial part, and I kind of like checking things off my to-do list. I do have some investigative things here, so I want to make sure I look into database repository injections, because when I was typing out my tickets, I had a hard time wording things, and often when you can't explain something to someone else, it means you don't know it well enough. So that's why I need to study that. And then I also want to figure out how I want to do toast notifications. When I originally set up Coding with Callie's website, I used Toastify, I think. It's an NPM package to do my toasts. But I just recently discovered that Chakra UI has built-in toasts. So I need to figure out if I want to kind of change how I'm doing toasts. That's what the to investigates for. All right, let's return to our main to-do list. All right, so then I kind of color coordinated the rest. So orange is going to be project setup. It's not really broken into user stories, and like the user doesn't get anything out of project setup, okay? But we have to do it. The next, in blue, I have my like user account features. I have one for the creation of the user account and one for the maintenance. So creation would be like the login, sign in, log out, right? And then maintenance would be like editing your details and deleting. Originally had those as one feature, but I am only going to spend like an hour, maybe 2 hours a night on this. So I thought, in order to make some quality code, I'm going to do the user account creation and maintenance over 2 weeks. All right, then I also have my purple features, which is all going to be about project workflow. So following CRUD a little bit, I have my create project workflow. So it's going to be the creation of projects, features, user stories, and developer tasks. Then edit project workflow is going to be all about editing those things. And then delete makes sense. It's all about deleting. So let's go ahead and go through those. It's going to be pretty repetitive because we've already gone through what the front end looks like and all of the requirements for the front end, and we already went over what the back end looks like and all of the requirements for that. So this is just the catch-all for everything, okay? And then it's kind of the schedule for it. So for account creation, I have users can create account, users can log in, and users can log out. So this is going to cover all of the steps that it's going to take to create an account, okay? So I need a sign up page added to my router on my front end, okay? I need to create an account form. I need an on-change function that saves all of the form data. I need an on-submit function that submits the form data to the API. I need to add data validation to the on-submit function, and then I need to add the HTML sanitize and validation to the backend as well. I need to create my Nest.js auth guard that guards my routes and requires a user's logged in to see them. I need to create a sign up route, create an upload photo route because we're going to use that to upload the photo to the S3 bucket to get the URL to then put it into the user database table, which speaking of, we need to create that user table. We need a sign up function that is going to be called by the sign up route. We also need to create an email service and a new user email, and we're going to use Node Mailer for this. So that way when a user signs up, we can send them a welcome to the project planning app, okay? And then we also need to create a success toast for account creation. So those are kind of the broad general steps for this. User can log in. We also have several tasks. We need to create a form on the front end that they can use. We need to save data as you type information into the form. We need to be able to submit that data to the API. On the API, we need a login route, a login function that's associated with that route. We need a verify password function that's called within the login function to verify that the password is correct. We need a create token function that's also called in this line of functions that creates the JWT. And we need a success toast for account login. All right, users can also log out, okay? So we are going to, in order to log out, while we're not going to flesh out the profile page at this stage, we are going to create the page and add that route to our router on the front end. And every page should have a loader function, or at least if the page needs data, it should have a loader function, or if it's a protected page, it should have a loader function, right? So the profile page, we're gonna need to display user data, so we need a loader function that goes and gets that data, right? So we have the profile page with the loader function set up to go get the user data, and then on it, we're not gonna do anything with that user data yet because it's not super necessary other than to have it, and but we're going to be able to create a logout button, and when we click that logout button, we actually aren't really doing anything on the back end. We're just going to remove that JWT, that access token from local storage, because we just want to lock down those routes again. And because we're sending that token in an authorization header, once we remove it, there's nothing to send. All right, and then we'll redirect the user to the login page. All right, so that is going to be, after my project setup, that's going to be my first week of work. My second week of work is going to be user account maintenance, okay? So I'm going to complete the 10 tasks that are associated with users can edit their account details. I'm gonna make it so users can reset their password, and I'm gonna make it so users can delete their account. We'll kind of quickly go through this, but the links are included on the submission page, so go ahead and click the link, scour through it. Feel free to send me questions if you have any, and we can even talk about like how you would do things differently, right? Because there are many ways to do this, and you just have to find the way that works best for you. All right, so this is going to be using the profile page profile, but we created that in the previous feature. All right, so we need to have an account details section added to that profile page matching the design. We need to add edit button icons next to all of the user data. We're going to have a different on-click function for the strings for the name, username, email, and password than we are for the photo. So this next section is talking about for the input fields, okay? So when you click on that edit button, the box that's showing the username is going to change into an input field where you can then type your own. When you press enter, then it's going to take that new field value and it's going to use that change account detail route that we just went over. So we need to create that route and create the function that actually goes and changes the account detail. Okay, then when the response comes back on the front end, we are going to set the name, username, email, and password. We're going to update them with the updated data. For the photo then, right, if they click the photo, they're going to have to upload a new, or the edit button next to the photo, they're going to upload a new photo. When they submit that, we're going to actually use the upload photo route to convert the file into a URL because we're going to upload it to S3 bucket on AWS, and then we're going to save that URL in the user table. Finally, on the front end, we will have a success toast notification. All right, resetting the password. We are going to have to create a button on the front end that starts the whole process off. All right, clicking that forgot your password button will open up a modal prompting the user to enter their password. Okay, so we'll have to create that form to get that email field and get that send verification email button. When I click send verification, it's going to send a request to the reset password route. And then we also will need to create the reset password function that actually goes ahead and checks if the email is in our system, finds the email, and then sends the email to the user with the URL. We'll have to create some sort of generic toast message, whether an email is found or not. And then we will need to add this profile token ID path to our router with a loader function. And this part is going to be cloudy, but essentially what we're doing is the token that is used in the link that's sent in the email is a different type of token than the login token. So we will add this to our front end router. So when we click it, it will allow them to access the profile page, okay? And then it will allow them to do that by going and verifying the reset password token and switching it out with a login token. Again, we'll go over it in more detail, but that's what this essentially is telling me to do. We'll create the route for that on the back end, and we'll create the function for that on the back end. All right, so in the future down the line, we might start to have users interacting with each other. That will make it hard to delete things, okay? Because let's say I post a project and then I have a functionality where John can come and comment on my project, okay? If I delete my project, okay, then I have to figure out what to do about John's comment. Do I also delete John's comment? Do I leave John's comment? But then what happens to the project? So there's issues based on all of the foreign key lookups that will happen once users can interact. Right now, though, users aren't interacting, so we don't have to do what the solution would be, which is called a soft delete. So we're going to actually delete for now. So if the delete button on that profile page is clicked, we are going to go ahead and delete the token from local storage so they can't access any protected routes in the future. And then we're going to send a request to that delete user route, which will then delete the user and all of their projects, features, user stories, and tasks. And that is what I am saying is week 2's amount of work. All right. The next 3 weeks, I will be working on the project workflow. All right. So the first week, I'm just going to focus on creating projects, creating features within projects, user stories within features, and developer tasks within user stories. Okay? you'll start to see like this is kind of also repetitive, right? You fill out you fill out a form, you save that, you save it on the back, you create a route on the back end that you send that information to, then you save that information in your database, and then you return the updated information or you return a success message, right? Eventually we'll also be adding like error handling, so if like what happens if it doesn't work out, right? But essentially that's kind of what we're doing over and over, okay? So for this, we will need to create a projects page that will load all of the user's current projects names, descriptions, and statuses. Okay, so we'll have to create the route that gets those projects. Then I kind of go into creating all of the like UI features. So I'm gonna need the individual project boxes and then also that add project drop-down component, okay? These are the front end functions that I'll need in order to get the project name and description once you fill out that form and then send that to the back end, okay? So in order to save a project in the project table in the database, I need a project table. So I'm gonna create it. I'm gonna create the route that creates the project. I'm gonna create the function that creates the project, right? And then I'm going to create a get users function as well that the create project function will call at the end. So the create project function is going to create the project, but we don't want to have to make two different calls. So we're just going to return with all of the projects, and then we'll have a successful toast at the end. You'll see features works pretty similarly. So on features, and those, if you remember on the project specific page, right? So we're gonna have to create a project specific page that's going to load that specific project's data, hence the creating the get project API route. We will use the ID to get the project from the URL. So we'll have to create a project by ID function. We will then start doing the front end UI work, right? So we'll have to create the project name and description header. We'll have to create the individual feature boxes with the name and status. We'll have to create the to-do, in progress, and done columns. We'll have to create the add a feature drop-down component with the header button and the body form. So when you click the little plus button, remember it turns into an X. Then we have to have the on change and on submit buttons to save the data on the front end and then submit the data to be saved on the back end. So we need a table to save that data in. We need a create feature route, okay? The route we'll call the create feature function, which saves that feature in our new feature table. And then we will have a successful toast on the feature creation on the front end. All right, user stories work pretty similarly. All right, so user stories are going to be popped up on when you click on an individual feature. A modal with the feature details will pop up, and then you'll see like a list of user stories that are all drop downs, right? So these first ones are basically like, okay, we need to create that feature modal component. We need to create at the top, the feature details header. Then we need to create that user story drop down list, okay? When you do drop, the body of that drop down has like two sections to it. So this task is saying like, okay, create the user story description part at the top of the drop down body. And then in the header, underneath the drop down component, we will have another drop down that is going to be the add a user story drop down component. So when you click on that plus, then we'll see the form, that's that body form, which then needs an on change and on submit function, okay? We'll need a user story table, we'll need a user story route, and a user story function that creates the story and saves it in our new user story database table, and then our success toast at the end. Finally, we have creating our developer tasks within a user story. This one is a little bit different because we have statuses instead of descriptions, okay? but we're not really worried about the statuses right now. So we're just going to, when we create a task, we're going to create it with the default status of to do, okay? So when I click on the little drop down arrow for the user story, on the top, it's going to give me the description, which we coded in our last user story when we were doing the developer task for the last one, right? But now we're going to add that list of all the developer tasks that exist, okay? We're also at the end of it going to include an added task drop-down component, little plus sign, right? Once again, when you click the plus sign, you're going to see a body with a form to fill out. So when you fill it out, we need it on change and on submit functions. Then we'll need a task table in the database, the API route, and the corresponding function that saves that new task in the database. And as always, our successful toast. So this is going to be my week 3 feature. All right. My week 4 feature is going to be editing the project workflow. Okay. So we want to be able to edit the project, features, stories, and tasks, okay? So projects, the only things that we can edit is going to be the project name and the project description. So we want to add the edit icon buttons, and we want to set up so when I click that edit icon button, what's going to happen is the project name is going to change from just using like a Shocker UI box to an input field, and then I can change the name, okay? On pressing the enter key, then I'm going to ping that update project API route, which then calls the update project function that we went over when we went over the API routes, okay? And then finally, we will have a successful toast for editing the project. Feature works the same way. User story works the same way. And task works similarly, but a little bit differently, so we will go over this one, okay? So we want an edit icon button, like the other ones, that turns the task into an editable input box, okay? Then when we are typing in the new name, we'll have an on-change function to save it on the front end. When we click the enter key, it's going to then send that name to the back end to be updated, okay? We also have the ability to update the task status. So that's going to be a select field. So when I click on where originally the default would be to do, when I click on that, a drop-down a select, right, with multiple options will appear with to do, in progress, and done, okay? I can select whichever one I want. And then once it closes, once I select one, then it's going to go ahead and send that new task status to the API, which we'll call the update task function, and save it in the task table. Finally, like always, we have our success toast for editing a task. All right, our final feature that I am going to work on for this project, at least this iteration of the project, because I definitely had to cut out a lot of ideas in order to condense it to 5 features over the course of 5 weeks. But anyway, final one that I'm going to work on in this workshop is delete project workflow. So users are going to be able to delete a project, delete a feature, delete user story, and delete a task. When we went over their wireframes, we saw that there's going to be modals confirming that you want to delete for project, feature, and user story, but task you can just delete. So let's go ahead and start with task because that's going to be the simplest one to do, okay? So front end, we need to have a delete button, so we're going to add the delete icon button to the task box. We'll create a function that when I click on that button, it will go and send a request to the API delete the task, okay? We have to set up that route in order for that function to work. And then that route will call a delete task function on the back end that deletes the task from the database. Then we'll show our successful message. The only thing that's a little bit more complicated in terms of the other ones is the modal that we have to add. So I am going to need to add the delete user story buttons, right? And then when I click the delete, instead of pinging the backend, it's going to open a modal to confirm. And then when I click like yes, confirm, delete this, whatever, right? Then it's going to ping the back end. Okay, so I'm going to need to create a backend route, delete user story, and then a function that corresponds to that route that goes ahead and deletes the user story. And I put feature here, user story, and its corresponding tasks. And then our happy success toast. All right, feature works the same way, right? We got our modal, and we delete. We say, yep, confirmed, I want to delete, and then that's going to go ahead and ping a route that we create, which pings a function that we create, and then we have our toast. And project does the exact same thing. So that is going to be our to-do list Trello board, our plan for the next 6 weeks, okay? If you are not pleased with the plan that you created, you can use mine. You have the links now, so go ahead and copy everything that you need from it, and so that way you can kind of set up your project in the similar way. If you love the features that you chose, but you feel like you need to now add a wireframe, go ahead and work on that. You can work on that feature by feature too. And same with like the API routes. Feel free to kind of get Excalidraw up or Miro up and start charting that out. All right, everybody, happy coding.